The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. For years we have been predicting the rise of a united Europe led by Germany in what will become the final revival of the Holy Roman Empire. Before us, Herbert W. Armstrong prophesied of this event over 70 years ago, even after Germany had been smashed and then divided in two at the close of the Second World War. Today, Europe is in the throes of economic turmoil, and yet Germany is clearly rising to the top, and fast. In newspapers and on websites all over the world, we are now seeing headlines similar to what Mr. Armstrong wrote many decades ago. Today on the Trumpet Daily, we bring you another segment my father recently taped for his weekly program, The Key of David, about what we can expect from the final resurrection of a German-dominated European superpower.
Here are two of the most alarming headlines since World War II. The first headline, Rise of the Fourth Reich, how Germany is using the financial crisis to conquer Europe. That's from the Mail Online, August 17, 2011 by Simon Heffer, and these are mainstream outlets. Here's the next title. The Euro crisis will give Germany the empire it's always dreamed of, by Peter Osborne, July 21st, 2011. And here is a far more alarming fact. We prophesied those very headlines 65 years ago, and we were the only ones to do so. We continued to be the only ones to write such headlines and explain them until this year. Now several other voices are writing the same or similar headlines. These staggering events are going to shake the lives of all of us. Those two headlines I just read to you are almost identical to ones we wrote immediately after World War II, and nobody at that time was writing any such headline but this church. Now, we continued to write headlines like that from World War II down to the present time and explaining what they all meant, and nobody else was doing it. How do you explain that, and what does it all mean to you? Because it is going to reach into your life, that is, these events are, and we need to understand them. Let me read those two headlines to you again. Rise of the Fourth Reich, how Germany is using the financial crisis to conquer Europe. And the other one, the Euro crisis will give Germany the empire it's always dreamed of. Now, we have been talking about headlines very similar to that for many years. But before I explain those two headlines, I want to give you a few headlines that we have written from World War II right down to the present. I'll have to read a few of them to you to illustrate that we were making those same statements some 65 years ago. Now, how could that be possible? And how astonishing is that when you think about it? What does it all mean? We've been just continually writing those headlines throughout the years, and now, all of a sudden, just this year, a few other journalists are writing such headlines. What does that mean? Well, I'll first give you a statement Mr. Armstrong made about the financial crisis we're now experiencing, which was a little later than World War II. And I'll just quote him from 1984. In 1984, he wrote that a massive banking crisis in America could suddenly result in triggering European nations to unite as a new world power larger than either the Soviet Union or the U.S. That in turn could bring on the Great Tribulation suddenly, and that will lead quickly to the second coming of Christ and the end of this world as we know it. Now that's from a co-worker letter, July 22nd, 1984. That's bad news, but it also is concluded by the best news we could possibly ever hear. The bad news is connected to the best news we could hear. It's all connected. It's all one package. That's what we need to understand. If you haven't heard about our financial crisis, and I think everybody has, then let me read to you what a few journalists have written about our economic problems and our financial problems. Here is a quote from the New York Times. "The nation is gripped by the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression," the New York Times wrote September 21st, 2008. And then they went on to say in that same article that this is potentially apocalyptic. They're talking about Revelation, the book of Revelation, and saying this is really something that could be, well, like the apocalypse. Although they don't really know what that means, but nevertheless, you understand what they mean. One of the journalists there at the New York Times, Tom Friedman, said that this is potentially catastrophic. That is, the financial problems that we're having here in the U.S. and in Britain and other places in the world. Here's what Der Spiegel from Germany said. "It really does look as if the foundations of U.S. capitalism have shattered," according to that magazine. Let me read to you a prophecy about what we're talking about here. This is the heart of it. In Revelation 17 and verse 10. "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space." So these are those times where these are things which must shortly come to pass, Revelation 1 and verse 1 says. And it's talking about the Holy Roman Empire. Let me just quickly read to you those first 5 empires that have fallen. That is, these Roman empires resurrected under the successive leadership of Justinian, enthroned as emperor in AD 554, Charlemagne, crowned in AD 800, Otto the Great in AD 962, Charles V, commencing the Habsburg dynasty in 1530, and Napoleon, who crowned himself emperor in 1804. And then came the Hitler-Mussolini head, number 6, or the one that is. And God had His apostle come on the scene at that time to explain what it all meant, which he did for many, many years until he died in 1986. God had to have somebody here to explain what was happening in all of those intervening years from World War II until 1986. And then He raised up another work. Notice what Mr. Armstrong wrote in The Plain Truth, 1952. Now this is 1952. "The United States is determined now to let nothing stand in the way of building up a rearmed, independent Germany. This will be the heart and core of the united Europe that will revive the Roman Empire." And many people scoffed, and the United States was doing something even contrary to its own philosophy, as I'll show you in a moment, and certainly contrary to Bible prophecy, or what Bible prophecy says they ought to have done and did not. The United States just ignored the warnings of Herbert W. Armstrong, and so did the United Kingdom or Britain. And it's leading to a calamity. Notice what he wrote in 1953. Mr. Armstrong wrote this: "The peoples of Europe as a whole want a united Europe, and yet, without Germany, such a federation of nations is impossible." It's just impossible to have it without Germany being the force behind it. And that's what they are today. and they have conquered Europe financially, but it's going to lead to a lot more than that, a lot more than you could even dream of. And we need to understand it. We need to understand what God is saying in Bible prophecy, or we're going to suffer if we don't. Notice what he said in 1956. Mr. Armstrong wrote that the Europeans were, quote, thinking more and more about the coming United States of Europe. Europe is going to unite against us. And now Europe is about ready for it. The stage is all set. All that's lacking now is the strong leader, the coming Fuhrer. Now, who could that be? This was 1954. And all Europe needed even then was the strong man, and he's about to come on the scene. And I certainly believe we may know who he is. I'm not certain. But he's already on the scene, and I believe could take control of that empire even as early as this year, and certainly sometime next year. Notice what we wrote, what Mr. Armstrong wrote in 1954. And he quoted the Americans and British in their document about what must be done with Germany after they were defeated in World War II. He's quoting Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. It is our inflexible purpose to destroy German militarism and Nazism and to ensure Germany will never again be able to disturb the peace of the world, because they've just done it repeatedly. They started World War I, and they started World War II, and they started many wars previous to that. He continues, quoting them, "We are determined to disarm and disband all German armed forces, break up for all time the German General Staff that has repeatedly contrived the resurgence of German militarism." And now, a short 9 years later, Mr. Armstrong wrote in his own words, "Behold the spectacle of Washington and London making every possible diplomatic effort, backed by American dollars, to do two things: create a United States of Europe and to rearm Germany." The plain truth, November, December 1954. So they're doing the very opposite, or they did the very opposite of what they said they were going to do. They were going to make sure that Germany was never rearmed again. And then, lo and behold, America itself rearmed Germany. Now, that is a mystery, isn't it? Why would they go against their own philosophy? Well, communism had something to do with it, but still, it was a very, very fatally unwise move. Here's what Mr. Armstrong continued to say: all Europe is actually ready, just waiting for the confidence-inspiring leader. That man is there somewhere. Now, that was all written in 1954. And I can tell you that this man is going to come on the scene, and it's going to be kind of amazing how he does that. And notice in this article I quoted earlier, from the Mail Online, Rise of the Fourth Reich, and here's what it said in that article. Stern, the German news magazine, conducted a poll last week among Mrs. Merkel's own supporters that showed that 52% were opposed to her bailout policy, and 62% worried about the course of her party generally. She is only 2 years from having to fight another election and cannot defy democratic gravity forever. Well, now, this strong man is coming on the scene, and I would predict to you, I believe this is going to happen. I'm not saying it absolutely, but I believe that man will come on the scene before that election of Angela Merkel's is even held, and he will bring about and engineer a kind of a collapse of the government, and then they will form some kind of a coalition, I believe, that will have to bring him into power, because Daniel 11 and verse 21 says that this man is going to come in by flatteries, not by being voted in. And Daniel 11 is a very significant chapter that we quote from continually about prophecy for this end time, but the whole book of Daniel is prophecy for this end time. It says so in Daniel 12 and verse 4 and verse 9. So I think Angela Merkel's going to be out before that election is even held 2 years from now. Now again, I don't know for certain, but I'm just making that statement based on Bible prophecy. And that's why Mr. Armstrong could make all of those statements. They were all based on Bible prophecy. Because what God says is fulfilled every single time and fulfilled precisely. I believe God as Mr. Armstrong believed God. That's the problem with most of humanity. They don't believe God. They may believe about Him and believe about Christ, have a belief about them, but they don't believe God. They don't believe what He said. Here's another quote. This one from 1957. Quote, even during World War II, while Allied bombers were busily pounding Germany to a shattered, bleak pile of rubble, Mr. Armstrong was warning his listeners and readers that Germany was going to rise again. They didn't believe it. Look about you now. Were the warnings sound? Were they true? Have they happened? Taken from the Plain Truth, 1957. 1957. And it's all coming to pass. It's all coming to pass, and it could come to pass this year, and certainly is very apt to come to pass next year, most of this. But we saw it all happening 65 years ago today. Now, how could that possibly be? How could we possibly do that? And throughout those years, since World War II, we have been writing prophecies about this and headlines like these two men have written just this year. But we've been doing it for 65 years. How do you explain that? Mr. Armstrong wrote this in December 1963, where he said, quote, nearly all the top industrialists in the Ruhr are former Nazis, members of the present government, including the CDU, that political party, are known card-carrying former Nazis. Well, what happened after World War II? Did we really clear out all the Nazis? No, we didn't. Didn't even really make a strong attempt at it. In Germany, well, the same spirit has continued. Now they've gone underground with their, let's say, hard line, but they didn't really change. The Bible says they went underground into the abyss, the underground, and that's where they're working and scheming to bring all these things to pass. Even today, they're doing that. You need to write for our booklet on Germany Conquers the Balkans, and it'll explain all that to you and show you how they did go underground and how they've been working all these years, and we've been telling you about it throughout the years. And the government of the U.S. even knew about it throughout, a lot of about them going underground and continuing their work even right after World War II, but they classified the document and didn't release it until the early 90s. And we explain all that to you. So most German leaders just went back to business as usual. And Mr. Armstrong in 1967 talked about the cry for a political union. See, that's very loud now. Political union is going on right now. That's, see, again, the kind of headline we were writing many years ago. Mr. Armstrong wrote, biblical prophecy revealed that this empire would start as an economic movement, that it would bring an era of unusual prosperity to Europe. It did start in March 1957 when 6 European countries, West Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, signed the Treaty of Rome, creating the European Economic Community. How did I know as far back as 1927 that this coming United States of Europe would spring up in our time? I knew because I saw it clearly revealed in biblical prophecy. That from March 1973. And he's known about it for over 80 years, but he wasn't able to proclaim it until into the 30s. But this is is actually the news of the century. What could be more alarming than this? And frankly, what could be more wonderful when you realize it's all tied to the second coming of Jesus Christ? I mean, this is the news of all of man's history. This is it. This is the great news of all man's history. This is it. It all culminates in the return of Jesus Christ to this earth to stop the madness in this world. What a wonderful truth that is. And how sad that so few understand it. And they've scoffed at Mr. Armstrong when he talked about Germany rising from the ruins and becoming perhaps more powerful than the United States or Britain or any superpower in the world. That is amazing. And then here's what he wrote in July 24, 1983. Quote, the very first issue of the Plain Truth magazine appeared February 1934, just 50 years ago, lacking about 6 months. The article started on the cover page, warned of a coming sudden appearance of a resurrected Holy Roman Empire in Europe, a union of 10 nations in Europe under one government with one united military force. There are going to be 10 nations or 10 kings. Right now there are 27. But what is going on? Is that about to change? Are they about to reduce that number rather violently? Yes, they are. And we have been telling you that for years. Notice what the Economist wrote September 10th of this year. Quote, all of a sudden, though, Berlin is abuzz with talk of remaking the European Union. Now you watch. You watch. They're going to remake it into 10 kings, 10 rulers that it talks about in Revelation 17 and verse 10 that I just read to you. 5 are fallen and 1 is. And in that chapter, you read that chapter. I don't think I'll have time to read it to you, but it talks about it. This last resurrection of that Holy Roman Empire is going to be comprised of 10 kings. 10. And now they're abuzz about reshaping it. Oh, indeed they are. And they're talking about reshaping it in a way that would reduce it down considerably to core nations that they know they can control. Germany knows they can control. And they're all united in the way they think and really become a superpower for the ages. Here's what this Mail Online wrote. This article was about. Let me just read a little bit of it to you. Greece, Ireland, and Portugal are economic basket cases. Trouble in Spain and Italy is tottering. And then the recent addition of France to the list of at-risk economies. Germany lay in ruins in 1945, this article says, but it then invested in manufacturing plant, developed first-class education, and so on. Over the next 60 years, it won the peace as comprehensively as it lost the war. Be in no doubt that fiscal union means it is one economic policy, one taxation system, one social security system, one debt, one economy, one finance minister, and all of the above would be German. That means a complete fiscal union in which Germany, as the EU's most powerful economy and principal paymaster, makes the rules and makes them unbreakable. He's talking about the Fourth Reich. The Fourth Reich. Is it going to be like the Third Reich? Is it going to be a war-making machine like the Third Reich? That's what he's implying, isn't it? And that's what we've been telling you for many years. It's going to be far more deadly than the Third Reich ever was. So says your Bible. He says it is a high-risk strategy on his part, for if such a plan succeeded, it would make Europe effectively a German empire. He goes on to talk about that, and then Greece and Ireland and all these countries are basket cases. He says this would entail a loss of sovereignty, not seen in those countries since many were under the jackboot of the Third Reich 70 years ago. Well, what do you know? History is repeating itself. History is repeating itself. And he concludes by saying, where Hitler failed by military means to conquer Europe, modern Germans are succeeding through trade and financial discipline. Welcome to the Fourth Reich, he concludes. Welcome to the Fourth Reich. And we've been telling you about it for 65 years, and nobody else has been explaining that to you or even talking about it for most of those years. Now, how do you explain that? And what does it mean? It just means that we must believe God. We must believe what He says. It always comes to pass exactly as He says. You need our booklet on Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. Revelation 17, verse 10. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other's not yet come. But when he comes, he must continue a short space. You see, there is another that's not yet come. Another one has not yet come, another era of God's church to explain the conclusion of this Holy Roman Empire system that has continued for over 1,500 years, that Holy Roman Empire that has walked through rivers of blood to conquer. Now the other has come. Now the final head is here and everybody can see it. And now there is a voice, the voice crying out that it's here. And we're being warned, and the wonderful, wonderful conclusion is also here. The one that is under Mr. Armstrong, and now the other one has come. And what does that all mean to you? It means that Jesus Christ is about to return to this earth because He is going to restore that power, that final head of the Holy Roman Empire. Christ Himself is going to fight it, and He's going to conquer it with those who have given themselves to God in this age. They're going to help Him if they are willing to give up their lives today and support God and help Him fight and put down all rebellion and usher in the wonderful, wonderful world tomorrow.
Many of our viewers and regular readers of the Trumpet magazine will recognize that we proclaim the same message, the plain truth delivered for 52 years under the direction of its founder, Herbert W. Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong was one of the most prominent religious leaders of the 20th century. He was watched, read, and followed by millions of people worldwide. This free booklet, He Was Right, highlights the accuracy of Mr. Armstrong's many predictions about Europe and Germany, as well as numerous other prophecies he proclaimed, most of them now coming to pass before our eyes. Call the number on your screen or visit thetrumpetdaily.com to order this free publication today. When you call, also ask for this little booklet, The Rising Beast. This booklet explains what happened in the former Yugoslavia over the last 2 decades and how this conflict will soon stretch far beyond the boundaries of that region. Just call the number on your screen or visit thetrumpetdaily.com and we'll send you both of these booklets for free.